Hello, Csaba. It's so great to see you. Thank you for joining me for this coffee chat.
It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you. I can't wait to talk to you about your most recent article, Cognitive Diversity, the Greatest Asset or Liability. When I saw it, it brought so many things to mind, especially when I think about all of the adjustments we're now making as everyone thinks about their return to work and what that will look like. So I'd like to unpack just a few of the things that you addressed in the article. Is that all right?
Sure.
Great. You made what I thought was a really prophetic statement. You said, who are you when nobody is watching? And I think about the fact that we've all been in isolation for so long. And I just want to hear from you, what impact do you think our time alone has had on our awareness of our differences, how different we are from other people, and especially our ideas about diversity and inclusion?
I think it brought up a new set of challenges because when you go to work, you are distracted by your colleagues, and then the clients are annoying, and the boss is always there. There's so much pressure to conform to the norms. But when you are at home, alone, or with your family, then different rules apply. And you have to learn how to manage yourself, how to lead yourself, how to hold yourself accountable. And people didn't learn this. Most people don't know how to do it. It's a skill we need to learn. But if you're not exposed to a challenge, why would you do it? People don't do anything until it hurts enough. At work, they tell you exactly what is right, what is wrong, what is expected. But when you have to do it, you have to set your standards. That's a new set of challenges. And if you don't have the tools, you don't know how to do it, it's a struggle and it can be overwhelming.
That is really a good point. So the term that comes to mind is guardrails, right? And we're now faced with a situation where we have to create our own and we don't have a point of reference.
Yeah.
So when at the beginning of the pandemic, when they started to use the term social distance, it almost made me sad. Because when I work with global leaders and global teams, I talk about the necessity to really close up the social distance. And so I've been thinking more in terms of the physical distance, okay? But be that as it may, we always have this, underlying consideration around psychological safety. Mm-hmm. So when you think about not really having the tools and trying to develop those things on your own, and even more so if you're a new person to a team, if you were new to an existing team when all of this took place, when all of this started with COVID, what do you think the impact has been on the development of psychological safety because of all of this distance?
I think you brought up a really important question because we have to separate the physical distancing and also the isolation. Because yes, maybe we are more isolated, but also much more connected, let's be honest. Just because we have to keep the distance physically, a lot of people chose to call the people that they used to ignore. And now they also appreciate it because maybe talking to the family, talking to colleagues used to be annoyance. And now, you know what, I'm missing it. So you know what, let me send you a text. Let me get in touch with you. Evolution happens under pressure. So when something is taken away from us, then we learn, oh, wait, I need it now. I do appreciate it. I used to take it for granted. So I think it was a wake-up call to many people as well. So maybe physically we are distant, but I think emotionally, often we are much more connected to others than before. So there are a lot of positive sides to the pandemic as well, and often we don't talk about that. And you mentioned psychological safety. It's not the same as physical comfort. Psychological safety is earned through interaction, when we overcome challenges together. So that's one of those. How do you do that? How can I reach out to other people to ask for help? How do I provide help? I think this is exactly where we can earn it, not when everything is fine.
Yeah. That reaching out has been so challenging, and I hear from clients almost on a daily basis, I'd like to talk to this person, or I'd like to really get to know, this new colleague a little bit more, but the formality that's involved with just, are you available for a Zoom or can you meet on Microsoft Teams, whatever it is, as opposed to let's just go get coffee when we were in the office, right? And it's been very difficult for many people to overcome those steps that are in the way now, that impede our ability to just get together with somebody to connect. And so now we're in a period of adjustment again, trying to figure out what it's going to be like to go back. And as you said, there have been many benefits, especially for people with children and extended families. They've been able to spend more time. What do you think that we can do to adjust, to help reassimilate back into the workplace?
I think the real problem is if we assume that we can go back and it's going to be the same. Because if that's the expectation, then we are setting ourselves up for a big disappointment. And this is what we often do. It's called regression, that we just go back to the golden era and we prettify everything that it was a fantastic world. No, it wasn't. That's the reason why we are here now. So how about leveling up? How about thinking what worked and what we can do even better? And we co-create something instead of rushing back to something that doesn't exist anymore. To me, that would be the real question, because this is an opportunity. You can dismiss everything that didn't make sense. So even if you think about the definition of culture, especially in a corporate environment, the behavior that is rewarded and punished. Culture, it's a group habit, a habit. By nature, it's a habit, so it's not up to date. We used to have best practices. Yes, they were the best ones that time, but are they still serving us now? Or they might be hurting us. Now it's the opportunity to reevaluate them and upgrade them. It doesn't mean that we disrespect our heritage. Changing our mind doesn't mean that we betray our personality. It is an opportunity. So I think if we approach it with an open mind, and also we want to co-create it, then we can create a high level of engagement, because we're not imposing anything on people. But when they feel that they have a saying in it, then they are much more engaged. And I think that's how we can help each other.
The magic there is in the term co-create, I think, that you used, because like nothing before for most of us in our lifetimes, COVID leveled the playing field. And so we really are at a place where we're at the same starting point, whether we think we are or not. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about how we I almost don't want to use the term return, how we re-enter, because I agree. The look back is going to have minimal value for us, right? Because everything is new from this point forward. And so I can't help but think about conflicts. I can't help but think about dissidence and differences of opinion. And so when you think about some of the things that might have become amplified, team members that may not have gotten along very well and things like that, or team members who are working together for the first time, how do we need to change our thinking and our mindset around the way we feel about differences of opinion and addressing and resolving conflict?
I think some of the problems were amplified because we lost skills. So, the past 18 months, we were working from home, and we don't have to interact with people who were thinking and behaving differently. When you go to work and there's a colleague that you cannot stand, you still have to make it work. But when you are at home and you work online, then you can block them, you can ignore them. You don't have to see their faces every day. So we are not practicing those skills. How do you solve a conflict? How do you get along with people? Right now, it's way too easy to join the groups where people agree with you, and you can block the people who disagree with you. So we are losing those skills because it's comfortable. But when you go back, you cannot ignore them anymore. You have to deal with them. And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge. Because if you don't run for 18 months, then it's going to be difficult. It's going to come back, but it is going to be difficult. And maybe the problem feels much more serious than it is. But also, there's an opportunity there. Because you can think about, I think, how serious the problem is. Is it just annoying? And because maybe it used to be, or is it a serious problem? And that was the opportunity for us now, just to think about what matters to us. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are not going to go back because they realize that, that's not my life. I had time to think. Life is important to me, my family, my dreams. And I think a lot of people are not going to do that. But when you're in the rat race and you're busy and you just react and you're an autopilot, you don't even notice it. But when you get out of it and you can see it from an outside perspective, it can be disturbing, but also eye-opening. And that can be a really positive change.
Yeah, no, I think that there's quite a bit that has been eye-opening, even to the extent of recognizing that some of the conflicts that you may have experienced previously were for good reason, and really beginning to value the other person's point of view. We don't always have time to do that, nor are we willing to admit to it, quite frankly. But when I hear you talk about this and not having the skills, I think part of this is a management imperative. We focus so much on technical skills and core competencies that we don't have as much accountability built around behavior and how we interact with each other. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about that.
So what is the exact question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's got to be accountability around what is expected of you. We're talking about, the person we bring to work and what we leave behind. And there's a certain professional protocol, whether we're remote or face-to-face, that is required for us to achieve collective outcomes together as a team, right? And I don't know that there's always the management imperative there. That I don't want to call it a mandate, but that sets that as an expectation.
It should depend on the results, because often we try to control everything and regulate it. But some people need a lot of freedom, and other people are stressed about it. And that's what we have to understand. If the results are good, give people the freedom. But like I was watching an interview with Will Smith, and he was talking about his kids. And he said, I give them the amount of freedom they can handle. Mm-hmm. If they cannot, then I take back some. Not because I hate them, not because I want to punish them. It's because I love them, because I want to protect them. And I think we could use the same principles. And that's why we have to understand the individuals, because some people are going to perform much better at home, and some people need that office. They need the instructions. And as a leader, you have to learn how to speak different languages, even if you're speaking the same one. And that's why it's important to understand the individuals, the underlying values and preferences. How much certainty some people need, or do they need more variety? Do they need challenges? And this is exactly where common sense and good intention can majestically backfire, because maybe you want the best for your people, but they are different. And the outcome is not going to be positive. So instead of focusing on the policies, I would focus on the results. Are they delivering? Yes or no? And according to that, you change it. You modify until everybody is happy. So we still have guidelines. We have standards, of course, but they're more individualized.
Absolutely. And you've got to tap into the secret element for each person in order to maximize what, their ability to be successful. Quite frankly, I mean, in a manager's role, it's a put your mask on first situation anyway, because we're, it's the human interaction there as well. So in your work and in your conversations, when we think about this idea of, who we bring with us and who we leave behind, and intentionally, I didn't say who we leave at home, because that might in and of itself be someone else, if you will, if there's certain elements of our personalities. What are your thoughts about how we can be intentional about that transition? Who we bring with us, how we show up in the office, in the workplace.
It's a really difficult topic, because I don't know if there's a clear dividing line. The question usually I ask is, how much do you have to pretend in order to be accepted at work? Yeah. And it's a horrible, horrible question, but we can ask the same one. How much do you have to pretend in your own family, in your own country, in your own profession? In every single culture group, there is a normal behavioral style that most people conform to. And the more different you are, the more consequences are there. That's the problem with that. So how much do you have to do it? But on the other side of the scale, there is the topic of inclusion. Where do you draw the line? What is acceptable? How much do I have to accept you? Sometimes, when there's a good idea, you can overdo it and it becomes a weakness. So in the spirit of inclusion, do I have to accept everything? You can do whatever you want to, or we still have standards and we still have values in the company? How authentic do you have to be, or can you be? If that's your nature, can you come to work in a short? Because that's who you are and that's how you express yourself? Or we have to set some boundaries. But then, am I limiting your freedom? Am I not inclusive enough? And I think there's always a price to it. When people want the freedom, usually they don't want to pay the price, which is responsibility. It's not free. We don't live in isolation. Yes, I can be myself, but how does it affect other people? What is the context? Because I believe in the freedom of speech, so I can say anything I want. But if you say something I don't like, I get offended. It should be a two-way street, not one-sided. And I think this is the problem with that. If we overdo this authenticity, then it becomes toxic. Yeah. And it becomes the most glorified version of fixed mindset. This is who I am, deal with it. That's me. Fantastic, yeah. But you are not alone. If you want to be alone, go and be alone. But you're going to crawl back and you want to be part of the society again later on. It's difficult to find that balance.
No, it is. And you made a beautiful segue into what was going to be my next question, actually, around authenticity. You and I have had some interesting conversations around authenticity and its impact, and the transition into it being, something other than favorable, I'll say. But I think that for people who have different, and I've heard many different definitions and descriptions about what it means to be authentic. Mm-hmm. I think that people are longing to be able to hold on to as much of themselves as possible. A few minutes ago, you referenced the fact that, people are looking at their circumstances and saying, this is not my life, or perhaps not the life that I want for myself. And I want to think about making some changes. And so it can be difficult to draw that line. And so, yeah. So if you could really characterize almost an ideal team, right? If we just fantasize a little bit here and dream, what does that look like in terms of holding a space for different opinions and points of view, having a modicum of psychological safety that allows people to open up and share in earnest? What does that look like to you?
In the beginning, you mentioned the title of the article, that cognitive diversity is the greatest asset or liability. Mm-hmm. It depends on how much you understand yourself and others. And that is important. It's not automatic. It's not necessarily beneficial. You have to make it work, because that means that you have a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives. But if there's no psychological safety and you don't know that you're working towards the same goal, then it's going to be a bloodbath. They're going to clash really quickly. And if you look at the research, 60 to 80% of all problems in a company stem from strained relationships between employees. And the top three reasons are clash of values, clash of personalities, and poor leadership. And all three of them stem from the same source, the lack of understanding of why people think and behave differently. So having different perspectives can be an asset. But if you are a leader, your number one priority is to provide clarity, the clarity of the future and the vision. Because once they have that, and everybody has the same, and they realize that doing that job supports their vision, and it expresses the highest values, then cognitive diversity makes sense. Not until then. Because if you're on the same page, but you are reading different books, then we are going to grow apart. For example, the Inc. magazine had this really interesting research. They asked the employees about the top 3 priorities of the company they work for. So it wasn't anything magical or abstract like mission statements. Top 3 priorities of the company you work for. They expected 64% of the people to know the answer. The real number was 2%.
Yeah.
So now imagine that. They don't have the vision, but they have lots of different opinions. How much potential is lost there? That's the real problem with that. But once they can buy into it and they understand the purpose, the bigger goal beyond that, then it makes it easier. If you are a leader, then you have to make sure that you can deliver the message in a way that you connect with everyone, you understand them, and they know how doing that job or task can help everyone achieve that goal. But motivation comes from that clarity. Can you really describe the future as vividly as other people can talk about the past? If you can, people can stand behind you. You are a leader. But a lot of leaders are against something, not for something. And that can backfire. Yeah. And if you don't have that vision in the future, then the feeling of familiarity is going to pull you back to the past. And that's dangerous. And we can see what's happening, and even in companies. And this is how we started the conversation. How do we go back? Because that was familiar. And there's so much uncertainty around me that I'm craving that feeling of familiarity, the illusion of certainty. So how can we make sure that people are more confident? Well, if you co-create something.
Yeah. I like what you said there about the illusion of certainty, because nothing, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but most things are not going to be the same, even similar moving forward. And so it becomes more of a challenge for leaders to establish that clarity on their own, and certainly to open up and get others to see what they see. I just want to pause for a second here and invite our listeners to share questions or ask questions if they have any as we continue. We have a few more minutes, but I also want to go back to that. And so the dynamism that we're facing with regard to this uncertainty that lies ahead, and the mitigated opportunity for leaders to really create that vision. This is the term that comes to mind is trust, really, because, I now, as a direct report, as a member of a team, have to trust in my leadership that they are taking us or moving things in the right direction. And so that's a whole, in my mind, that's a different dynamic. What do you think about that?
I think that can be the bottleneck in every company. I can't remember the research exactly, but it was about how much the employees trust the managers. And it turned out that most of the employees trust a stranger more than their direct manager.
Wow.
And that's not necessarily a good sign.
No.
And that's the problem with that. That if you don't have that psychological safety, you don't have the vision, then what's there to trust? You know that they are in survivor mode, especially the middle managers. According to Gallup, they are the bottom 5%, the most disengaged layer of a company. They are already stressed, and they are the ones who should motivate the employees. They should implement the employee engagement and well-being programs. Again, this is not a criticism, not at all. It's the exact opposite. It's a statement that they need help. They need people skills. They need to understand how they can turn diversity into synergy. Otherwise, it turns into painful liability. So how about focusing on the middle managers so they are less damaged by the time they get to a senior level? Because most of the budget is spent on them. But what if you go to the root cause of the problem before it becomes an issue? That would make much more sense. And then we can create trust. But when you are in survivor mode, then you don't have to be inclusive. You cannot even be inclusive. You have to be strong, you have to be quick, you have to protect yourself. Then it's difficult to create trust.
Yeah. So a term that shows up for me in all of this is courage, right? Because all of this, requires a little bit of a stretch for most people. And it's driven by fear, the decisions to, really go to the middle of some of these things to get to the core issues or not, right? And so it really takes a degree of fortitude, if you will, to really get to the root cause. But there's so much value on what's on the other side if you're willing and able to do that. So we have just a final few minutes, Csaba. I know that you're very busy and we have a lot of other things to do. So what final thoughts do you have when you think about preparing to move forward? I'm not going to say return to work, but move forward into what's next for the world of work.
I can tell you what I'm working on. And, this is something that I'm trying to practice every day, that instead of worrying about the past or what could go wrong, I'll put the same amount of energy into building what I really want. Because most people are worried about what they don't want. They are fighting it. And that's why they are losing energy. But when you ask them, so what do you want instead? They cannot tell you that. And that makes it very difficult. So they become anxious because of the future, become depressed when they are in the past. But according to a German researcher, we spend 3 seconds in the present. 3 seconds. And after that, we go to the future or the past. But everything happens now. And if you have that vision, you can work towards that. But if you don't, what else do you have left? The problems, the issues, the golden past, what else? We could use all that energy into building something what we want instead of fighting what we don't.
Yeah.
And I know that it's difficult, especially now when you watch the news and you read the newspapers, and it's depressing. But also it's a choice. Can you watch something else? Can you read instead? Can you hang out with people who you share the future with instead of a common past?
Yeah.
That's your choice as well.
Truer words never spoken. No, that's right. That's right. And there's not a lot that we can do about what's in the rearview mirror, but there's a great deal that we have control over and choices that we can make to inform what we want for ourselves and for our environment and society moving forward. Great, great point. And a good way to close. Thank you so much for this coffee chat. Really appreciate it and look forward to the next time we can come together.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Take care.